The still morning shattered as a woman in slippers screamed across the street, her voice shrill and accusatory. "Get away from that van, I've already called the cops." Her words cracked like a whip through the neighborhood, still clinging to its coffee and calm. The van in question wasn't unmarked out of secrecy. It was silent because it didn't have time for spectacle. Inside, a man's heart threatened to flatline, while two paramedics fought to keep the rhythm of life beating beneath their gloves. The irony? The woman barking threats was trying to stop them from saving her own husband. Fear screamed louder than fact that day, and the cost was almost fatal. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow, we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Ellie didn't even flinch. Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who'd done this in worse places. Far worse. Alongside her, Chris adjusted the oxygen feed, checking the defib pads and muttering vitals to the portable monitor. They weren't the average EMT crew. This van wasn't a typical ambulance. It was part of a new, elite mobile ICU unit designed for one thing: getting to cardiac emergencies faster than traditional systems could. They were the beta testers of a government trial, and they'd already saved more lives in 3 months than most standard ambulances in a year. Ellie had served in combat zones, where gunfire echoed louder than car horns. But this was different. This was a suburb. This was supposed to be safe. The van had been dispatched when a health alert pinged through their emergency system. Tom Whitaker's heart rate had spiked and crashed, a biometric signal sent from a smart wearable that synced with his daughter's phone in another state. One click and the van launched. No sirens, no waiting. 5 minutes flat, and they were already working on reviving him when the HOA's self-proclaimed queen stepped into the street like a crossing guard for catastrophe. Karen, bathrobe tied tight, wine glass still on the porch from the night before, wasn't just concerned. She was convinced. She'd seen the van circle twice. She'd heard about scam medics on social media. That was all it took. "This is a private street," she snapped, arms stretched wide. "You can't just park here. You're casing the block. This man's in cardiac arrest. Move." Karen scoffed. "Oh, really? Medical emergency? Sure. Where are the sirens? Where are the flashing lights?" Chris muttered under his breath, saving his life, not putting on a show. But Karen was already on the phone, talking fast. "Yes, it's here now. Big black van. No plates. Someone's inside. I think they're being kidnapped." Tom's lips turned blue. Ellie reached for the defibrillator. Clear. The jolt hit his chest. A twitch, a spike, something, but not enough. Then came the sirens, real this time, loud, aggressive. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop behind the van, tires barking on asphalt, doors flew open, guns drawn. Ellie raised her bloodied hands. "Emergency medical team," she shouted. "We're saving his life." An officer aimed straight at her. "Back away from the vehicle." Chris stepped out next, slow, careful, palms high. Karen hovered behind them, nodding smugly like she'd just solved a national crisis. "See? Told you. Criminals." An officer reached the rear doors and yanked them open. What he saw turned the situation on its head. Blinking monitors, tubes, meds, and Tom Whitaker strapped to a stretcher, barely alive. "Wait," the officer said slowly. That's Tom. That's my dad's fishing buddy." The color drained from Karen's face. Inside the van, Tom's heart dipped again. "Clear," Ellie barked. Another jolt. This time it stuck, a rhythm, weak but there. She spun toward the officers. "Unless you're planning to assist, get out of the way. We need an escort to County General, now." The cops blinked, nodded, radioed in an emergency clearance. As the van pulled away, Karen stood alone in the middle of the cul-de-sac, arms still crossed but suddenly very quiet. Her reflection in a neighbor's car window looked more villain than vigilante. She tried to fade into the background, to rewrite the narrative already unraveling around her. But Ellie wasn't done. This wasn't over. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a warning about what happens when control masks itself as concern and ignorance nearly stops a heart from beating. And by the end of it, everyone would know exactly who tried to block a miracle, and why she failed. The ICU van program wasn't created for convenience, it was built for war against time. These weren't just paramedics, they were elite medtech specialists, trained to operate in transit with gear rivaling most trauma bays. The van wasn't flashy because it wasn't supposed to be. It was engineered to be fast, efficient, and discreet, slipping through traffic and neighborhood gates to bring advanced care where time ran out faster than ambulances could arrive. A hospital heartbeat on wheels, that's how the project was pitched. And now, it was fighting for survival not on the battlefield, but in a cul-de-sac, where a clipboard warrior nearly derailed it with a phone call. Meanwhile, across town, Karen wasn't apologizing. She was busy rewriting the story. In her robe and indignation, she called Tom's daughter Rachel. "I just didn't know it was him," Karen said quickly. "I saw this van and I thought it was dangerous. I was doing my duty. I'm the neighborhood watch chair, after all." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Rachel's voice, sharp enough to cut glass. "You almost killed my dad," Karen sputtered. "But I called the police." "Because you couldn't be bothered to ask what was going on," Rachel snapped. "You didn't even walk over, you just panicked and made it worse. You'd rather be in charge than be useful." Then came the click. The call was over. So was the benefit of the doubt. Back at County General, the hospital staff was catching up with the chaos. Doctors noted the delay in Tom's chart. Critical intervention delayed due to civilian obstruction. The attending physician raised an eyebrow when he read the report. "Delayed by the homeowners association," he muttered. One of the nurses nodded. Wife flagged the van as suspicious. The doctor shook his head in disbelief. "We'll be lucky if this guy doesn't have long-term cardiac damage." Karen arrived 30 minutes later, fully dressed this time, but no less determined. She marched up to the nurse's desk and slapped her hand down. "I want a full list of the medic's credentials," she demanded. "Their certifications, their agency, everything. I have a right to know who touched my husband." The nurse didn't flinch. "Ma'am, the only thing you need to know is that they saved his life while you were dialing the wrong emergency." At that same moment, Ellie was sitting in a windowless hospital conference room with a laptop open and her glove still shoved into her back pocket. She wasn't angry, she was focused. She typed with precision, logging every second of the delay, every interaction with law enforcement, every vital stat they recorded before the confrontation. Her incident report read like a screenplay written by chaos. Civilian interference resulted in a 7-minute delay, verbal obstruction, accusation of kidnapping, weapons drawn by responding officers. CPR interrupted. She ended it with one line, "This isn't for payback, this is for precedent." As she closed her laptop, a hospital coordinator stepped in, eyes wide. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "That woman, the wife, apparently has a history." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "History?" The coordinator nodded, handing her a printout of local dispatch logs. 15 previous non-emergency 911 calls, noise complaints, loitering, suspicious vans, unmarked workers. She even called on a UPS driver once. Ellie scanned the paper. Her breath caught on one particular entry. 2 months ago, another medical van, different neighborhood, similar complaint. She didn't just call on us, she's done it before. She looked up slowly. Some people collect spoons. Karen collects 911 calls. Karen wasn't content with silence. Just days after Tom's near-death experience, she marched into the HOA board meeting like it was a courtroom. Waving printed screenshots, call logs, and an annotated copy of the neighborhood bylaws, she declared the medics in violation of unauthorized vehicular access, unesthetic presence, and disturbing the peace. She insisted that even emergency vehicles needed prior approval if parked longer than 5 minutes on residential streets. One board member asked, "Are we really talking about life support equipment here?" Karen replied without missing a beat, "Oxygen masks need permits if they're on my lawn." The room fell silent. Not because she won, because no one knew what to say to someone who valued paperwork over pulse. But the internet did. A video from a neighbor's Ring camera had gone viral, capturing Karen in full robe and slippers, screeching at medics as they performed CPR. The caption read, "CPR Karen, when HOA means harassment over aid." Within hours, the footage exploded across platforms. TikTok users reenacted the scene with garden hoses and yoga mats. Twitter threads dissected the HOA's bizarre bylaws. Even morning talk shows picked it up, dubbing it the suburban scandal of the season. Karen's face was now a meme, jaw clenched, arms folded, standing between a van and a life. She wasn't the hero of her story anymore. She was the warning. Then Rachel stepped into the spotlight. She held a small press conference outside County General. With TV cameras rolling and microphones packed together like sardines, she stood tall. "My name is Rachel Whitaker. My father is alive today because of medics who refuse to let ignorance win. I want to be clear. Karen Wilkins is not just my stepmother. She is the woman who delayed my father's resuscitation because she didn't like the look of the van. She chose her HOA title over his life. And now she wants to blame the very people who saved him?" The crowd was silent. Her voice cracked slightly. "If you've ever lived in fear of someone weaponizing rules, this story is for you." Ellie's phone hadn't stopped ringing. News outlets, medical podcasts, advocacy blogs, everyone wanted a quote. She finally agreed to one interview. Sitting on a metal bench outside the hospital, still in uniform, she spoke quietly but firmly. "I've dodged bullets in combat. I've had mortars fall 2 blocks from my field clinic. But this shook me more. Because I wasn't facing an enemy. I was facing someone who thought she was helping, but who couldn't see past her own authority complex, and almost got someone killed for it." Her words weren't angry, they were exhausted. The kind of tired only earned through lives nearly lost. And then, just when it seemed like Karen might disappear into her own embarrassment, she filed a lawsuit. A formal complaint landed on Ellie's desk: trespassing, emotional distress, defamation. Karen was suing the medics. The accusation? They entered private property without HOA consent. No one could believe it. But Karen? She doubled down. "This isn't about my husband," she said to the local reporter. "This is about law and order in our neighborhood." Ellie stared at the papers in disbelief and whispered to Chris, "She thinks CPR is a crime now?" He didn't laugh. Because this was no longer about one Karen, it was about every system that gave her power in the first place. The lawsuit didn't last long. The ICU program's legal team came down like a hammer. Full documentation, body cam footage, timestamps, expert witness reports. Within 72 hours, Karen's claims were dismissed as frivolous, and the court formally warned her about potential countersuits for wasting judicial resources. But the damage lingered. Headlines and hashtags were one thing. Public records, court filings, and bureaucratic hesitation? Those could slow down a life-saving program indefinitely. Ellie sat through 2 meetings where government reps questioned whether mobile ICU units needed more visibility, more markings, or worse, more pre-approvals. The irony stung. "We saved a man's life," she told the regional review board, "and now we're being told to ask permission before parking next to a dying heart." Meanwhile, something shifted in the neighborhood. What started as whispers turned into a full-blown uprising. Someone, no one claimed, started a petition to remove Karen from the HOA board. It spread like wildfire. Neighbors who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voice. Tina, 2 doors down, said she was fined $100, 0 cents, for leaving her trash can out an hour too long. James, who served overseas, shared how Karen cited him for an aggressively patriotic flag. One note on the petition read, "She didn't lead a board, she ruled a block." Karen tried to counter by hosting an emergency HOA transparency meeting. Only 4 people showed up. 3 of them were her family. Then came the public forum, a meeting hosted not by the HOA but by the residents themselves. In the local library's community room, over 40 neighbors gathered and shared stories. A woman in her 60s said she was fined for having too many wind chimes. A single dad held up a picture of his daughter's chalk drawing, cited as unapproved sidewalk art. Someone read aloud a notice Karen once sent warning about rogue mulch pile violation. The room laughed, but behind the humor was years of fear and frustration finally being released. "This wasn't an HOA," someone said. "It was a dictatorship wrapped in decorative mulch." The vote was swift. Emergency bylaws allowed for board suspension with 60% community support. They got 89%. Karen was removed from the HOA board in a meeting so tense it didn't need shouting, just signatures. She left without a word, face red, hands shaking. For the first time, the clipboard queen had nothing left to say. But Jake, a longtime neighbor and former city officer, said it best as she walked out. Authority without humility isn't leadership, it's tyranny with a name badge. But the fight wasn't over. Because while Karen had lost her title, she still had one final lever of power, a hidden one. As former board president, she retained administrative access to the HOA's online financial portal, a shared account that hadn't been updated since her removal. Inside it, she held the power to approve or deny expenses. The van reimbursement for the emergency team? Still pending. Community park upgrade funds? Frozen. And unless someone acted fast, her digital grip could still choke progress without ever stepping foot outside. It started with a simple invoice, $2,400.00 labeled Community Beautification Project, Patio Area C. But when the new HOA treasurer looked into it, there was no Area C, no blueprint, no sign-off, just a neatly landscaped stone patio with custom lighting in Karen's backyard. That was the first breadcrumb. Within days, the audit team uncovered nearly $35.00 in missed flagpole citations, new security cameras, HOA training retreats that were actually spa days at a mountain resort. She landscaped her lies, the treasurer muttered during the review, flipping through itemized receipts that included scented mulch and engraved stepping stones for her own garden. It didn't stop there. Karen had been using discretionary community emergency funds to reimburse herself for HOA-branded flyers, mailers, even a $900.00 community watch enhancement that turned out to be a personal drone she used to fly over properties checking for violations. By the time the report landed on the desk of the city attorney, the damage was undeniable. Obstruction of emergency services, false reporting to law enforcement, HOA financial fraud, and now pending charges under local misuse of authority statutes. Karen received a formal letter informing her that legal action was imminent. Her silence became deafening. The clipboard had finally turned into a subpoena. But the moment no one expected came from the man she nearly killed. Tom, recovered now, still hooked to oxygen for precaution but speaking clearly. He requested a meeting, not with lawyers or the board, but with Karen, in front of the HOA. He asked for her to listen. She arrived late, face drawn, hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. Tom sat with a calm that came from surviving something that nearly stole his last breath. "You didn't just delay CPR," he said softly. "You almost made me die in silence. Not because you meant to, but because you didn't want to be wrong." Karen tried to cry. She tried to speak. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," he interrupted, "and that's worse." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. After that day, something in the neighborhood changed. Not just the leadership, but the spirit. New rules were written, not in legalese, but in plain English. Community meetings were live-streamed. Budgets were posted monthly. The HOA didn't dissolve. It became human again. Neighbors organized block events. Fines became rare. Front yards turned colorful. A handmade sign appeared at the community park. Cared for by people, not power. The fear Karen once cultivated shriveled like dead ivy in summer. But not all battles were over. The pilot ICU van program, the very one that saved Tom's life, was now under review. A city council vote loomed. Budget lines were stretched. Some argued unmarked vehicles caused confusion. Others said the footage of Karen should be enough to justify permanent funding. Ellie prepared to testify. Chris gathered letters from families the van had helped. But no one could predict which way the vote would fall. And the question now wasn't just whether the van would stay, but whether the public would stand up before another neighborhood's emergency became its tragedy. The vote wasn't even close. Out of 15 city council members, 13 voted yes, 1 abstained, and only 1 held out on grounds of public confusion over emergency visuals. But the community had already spoken louder than the paperwork. Letters from survivors, petitions signed by residents, footage from Tom's case now used in training rooms across the county. The ICU van program was officially approved for full expansion. A fleet of 5 vans would now be deployed across districts, each equipped like Ellie's, each staffed by trauma responders trained not just to save lives, but to navigate chaos. Ellie, standing at the back of the room during the final announcement, didn't cheer. She just exhaled. "We've earned this," she whispered to Chris, who nodded back with quiet pride. But not everyone moved forward so easily. Karen, in a move few expected, submitted an application to volunteer at the same hospital where Tom was treated. A formality, she said, a gesture of remorse. But her name didn't pass unnoticed. The administrator reviewed her file, made one phone call, and denied the request. Later, Rachel explained why. "You didn't just block a driveway," she told Karen over the phone. "You blocked access to reason, to empathy, to my dad's chance. And this isn't about punishment. It's about trust. And that's not something you're owed." Karen never replied. She didn't try again. Ellie returned to the hospital a week later, not for a mission, but for a visit. Tom was sitting on a bench just outside the recovery wing, sunlight painting soft lines across his face. When he saw her, he stood slowly and opened his arms. "You gave me a chance." "She didn't," he said. She hugged him without hesitation. "You gave yourself that chance," she replied. "I just helped hold the line." They sat together for nearly an hour, trading quiet stories. Tom asked about the van, what it was like inside, how they decided where to go next. Ellie smiled. "It's a strange feeling," she said. "Chasing emergencies before they start. It's like hunting ghosts with a defibrillator." Tom chuckled, his voice lighter now. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep haunting." Back in the neighborhood, the street where Tom lived had changed. Sidewalk chalk drawings of the ICU van lined the curb in neon pinks and oranges. Kids wrote, "Thank you van, team," in bubble letters across the asphalt. Someone painted a small mural on the community park's wall, an ambulance lifting off like a spaceship, trailing hearts and lightning bolts. The banner at the cul-de-sac entrance read simply, "Life lives here." Ellie drove past it once on her way to a follow-up interview and couldn't help but smile. Not out of ego, but because the fear was gone, and in its place, color, joy, relief. A neighborhood breathing easy again. Then came the call. Chris answered his phone first, brow furrowing. He passed it to Ellie. On the other end, a voice she didn't recognize, but the tone was familiar. Urgent, nervous. "We've got a situation," the voice said. "Different town, same problem. The van's being blocked. Again." Ellie didn't ask for details. She just stood, grabbed her kit, and said what she always did when a life was on the line. "Send coordinates. We're on the way." Some stories don't just entertain, they wake people up. And this was one of them. In a cul-de-sac like many others, where hedges are trimmed and mailboxes matched, a life was nearly lost because fear shouted louder than reason. But this story isn't just about one man on a stretcher. It's about all of us. The neighbors, the daughters, the paramedics, the homeowners who wonder, what if it were me? Let's break it down. When you see flashing lights, sirens, or even just a van parked with purpose, pause. Not everything unfamiliar is dangerous. Ellie and Chris didn't wear capes or cruise in traditional ambulances, but they were saving lives before HOA bylaws could finish loading on someone's phone screen. Train your eyes before letting fear talk. We live in a world where frontline workers are stretched, misunderstood, and too often delayed by suspicion. Let's reverse that. Respect those who run toward the trouble while the rest of us freeze. You don't need to match Karen's volume, just outmatch her with facts. Document, record, screenshot. Know your state's laws on 911 misuse, false claims, and HOA governance. Every time Karen makes noise, respond with clarity. It's tempting to yell back, but real power is calm, collected, and indisputable. Ellie didn't raise her voice. She raised a community. "Rachel,"